All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the beat and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samo?
Well, I've got parasitic mind up there because people are being stupid again. And today's subject is Maduro in Venezuela, and not just what happened, but the aftermath of what happened and how stupid people can be. Let's get this started.
Well, this the stupidity is right where I was planning on going with this. Is again, we usually try to talk about these current events in the context of the bigger picture of okay, but what's the point? What's the underlying philosophical, psychological, historical example, whatever to so we don't just talk about the thing, but we try and make it a, for lack of a better term, a learning experience, as everything should be. And same old, once again, is what was our kind of our theme last year, especially towards the end of the year, was rigid mental thinking. And that is what I am seeing with this, and it's driving me crazy, is the rigid mental thinking of, and there are plenty of people on X doing the work for me. I don't have to go dig up all the contradictory hypocrisy because there are plenty of people side by side. Here's a post or a clip of somebody talking about how awful Trump was, about how illegal this was, etc., whatever. Oh, here's that same person during the last administration or during the Obama administration talking about how, or the first Trump administration, that exact same person talking about how terrible Maduro was, or Chavez before him, how terrible it is what is being inflicted on the Venezuelan people, and how something needs to be done. Well, something was done, and now those exact same people, simply because politics has now become a team jersey sporting event, and the good game doesn't matter. It's, oh no, the bad team lost. No, I hadn't even heard of this one.
Yeah,
All right, so
so
for anyone
the
just listening,
yeah, for anyone just listening, I brought up Snopes, which we know the leaning of their affiliations. The big question was, and something that came up later was, hey, this was the previous administration too. This wasn't just what's going on now. Uh, and so all the people that are like, oh, we stand with Venezuela. Da, 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 da. Well, if you stand with Venezuela, you should be against the evil dictator. But
mm-hmm,
the fact is that the previous administration also had a bounty on Nicolas Maduro to get rid of him, which
mm-hmm.
I don't know what that implies. Someone kill him and you'll pay him $25 million? Are we state sponsoring assassinations? Is that official? I don't know what that means. But
Yep.
apparently we had a $25 million bounty, and Snopes tries to sugarcoat it a little bit with their, as I scroll down, mostly true that the Biden administration had a $25 million bounty. Apparently, the first Trump administration placed a $15 million bounty on Maduro, and the Department of Treasury during Biden's term increased it to 25 million. So this is something that's been ongoing. This is something that's been backed by that side of the aisle going forward, and this is something we've everybody in America up until 4 days ago
Mm-hmm.
has said Maduro bad. Venezuela wipes their butt with their money because it's worthless. And he's just like, no, they stopped printing pennies, right? They stopped minting pennies because it takes 3 cents to make 1 cent, right? That's why they stopped making pennies. The paper that the Venezuelan dollar was on was worth more than the Venezuelan dollar. And
And for all of the people who are screeching about how all this is just, imperialism, colonialism, because Venezuela has, all right, so a little nerdery here. Yes, they have the largest known current reserves of oil. However, there are different kinds of oil in the ground. The stuff uh, Venezuela has is crud. I'm forgetting the name of it, but it's a particular type of crude. I want to say it's heavy, is the terminology they use. Sweet crude is another one for some silly reason, because it certainly doesn't smell sweet, and you don't want it in your face or in your mouth because I've been there, done that. Um, but that means it has more impurities in it, so it's more difficult to refine. So there is an asterisk there. but they do have a ludicrously large known oil reserve. Plus, they have a ton of other minerals in the northern Andes there that run through the western part of the country. It is an incredibly mineral rich country, which is why from
Gold too.
gold, yes,
Yeah.
gold is one of those minerals there in the mountains, and it is why until Chavez came along. Now, Chavez was able to come along because there was trouble in the administration in the decade or so before him.
Yeah,
But
it
until
was a crony capitalist
but in
administration, whatever kleptocracy or whatever it
yeah,
was. Yeah, what do you call it? And
but until the kind of
just like Putin in
corruptocracy,
Russia.
kleptocracy, exactly,
Yeah.
until that came along and until they started to go too far and ruin it for the common people, they were able to get away with it because the the uh the median income in Venezuela was by far the largest in all of South America for decades, for something like 40 years. They were by far the wealthiest country in total and per capita in South America. And so that is what Chavez and Maduro did to that country is they made it one of the poorest. Um,
Well, we have a visual here. This is GDP per capita,
mm,
1982 to 2022. And the red line, for those that can see it, is Venezuela. Sitting there at its peak was 18, about 18,000 and then it just steeply drops from there. So it
yeah,
goes down by almost
from
to a
from
quarter of what
around
it was before.
2013-ish to 2020, it cratered.
Yeah, and so we have a nation that's embraced capitalism, which is Poland, being uh, compared to it, and you see a steady rise during that whole time. And
Mm-hmm.
not only did they surpass them at about that time that Venezuela peaked, but they're double what that was at this point. So this is what a bad administration can do to your country. So it's this is per capita, so GDP per person. That's the amount of wealth lost per person. Just think of, not all of us are rich. Just think of what you have now and think of living on 25% of it.
That's the hypocrisy and the rigid mental thinking from the left. On the right, what's driving me crazy is this idea that America first means America only, and that no forever wars means no armed conflict ever. That is asinine.
No intervention ever. I'll use that
Yeah,
word.
that's a better term. No intervention ever.
And so
So
that's the big question coming out of this is okay, is this Iraq again? Which we all, I mean, I think at this point, most reasonable people can say that was a mistake and that was a waste of money, that was a waste of lives, that was a waste of all kinds of things.
that
Or is
was a
this,
screw up. I will say, and it wasn't a mistake. Mistakes were made afterwards. And ironically, so I think I've mentioned this before. There's a great it's really long form content, so you need to make some time or do it in batches. But there's a an Australian, when I started listening to him, he was a PhD candidate and now he's a history professor, and he does very long form history, mostly military history content. Hypohysterical History is the name of the channel. And he did a really good two-part series on just the invasion of Iraq and then just the immediate aftermath. So not the whole time, but he does a very good job of laying out where everything went wrong. And ironically, it was partly because W and his most of his administration had learned the lesson of Vietnam a little too well. And the lesson they learned was the interference from on high. So there was so much interference from the White House and the Pentagon in Washington that had no idea what was actually going on in country, and it made it harder for them to do their job in country. And so in the immediate aftermath, during the initial reconstruction phase, W didn't want to say, no, don't do that, do this because of that lesson. And it allowed some morons in the State Department and the Defense Department to screw things up by destabilizing the country. I won't go into the why.
Well, but then there's also things like what we have in the Middle East versus what we have in Venezuela is basically warring factions of terrorist groups. The Sunnis versus the Shiites versus the well, okay, those are religious factions, but they
Well, but
have
there is an
their
ethnic faction there in
yeah.
Iraq, which was a problem, as you did have a Sunni Shia schism, but then you also had the Kurds in the north who didn't
Mm.
like either of them. I don't even remember which religious faction they belong to, but ethnically they're separate and they don't like the rest of Iraq. So
Whereas in
you have
Venezuela,
that
you just
mess.
have the people versus the narcos. I mean,
But where you
yeah.
do have similarities is Iraq was relative to the rest of the Middle East fairly wealthy, fairly well educated, and fairly secular. That is why it was a good initial target. And then it was just a foobar reconstruction and administration that led to the forever war. But the other thing it did, more importantly, is if anyone has ever looked at a map before, we went into Afghanistan for obvious reasons. That was the origination of the 9/11 attack. That was where the Taliban was giving support to Al Qaeda. That's where Al Qaeda was based. We had justification to go into Iraq, however flimsy you think it was. But we also had good strategic reason to, not just for the reasons I laid out, because it was potentially a relatively easy takeover and nation building. What's to the east of Iraq? What's to the west of Afghanistan? Iran.
Hmm.
That was why we went in. That was the main reason we went into Iraq, is because we could justify it, however flimsily, but then we had Iran bracketed. We would have a military presence in Afghanistan. We would have a military presence in Iraq in the same way that we had military presence in Germany and military presence in Korea and Japan to bracket in the Soviet Union.
Yeah, well, and that's where I can sake this back to why we have to compare Iraq to something else, because the people you're talking about, mostly on the right, that are anti-interventionalists, are thinking of that. Why are we having military presence here and establishing this thing just to bracket another country and spending trillions of dollars and all of our lives and basically doing a bad job of it? But you and I are Gen X. And what millennials, if you're a millennial in the audience, you might need to hear is me and you are old enough to remember Panama.
Mm.
And Panama, to me, is more analogous to what we're doing here.
Yep.
Because Panama was a special forces raid. I think it was Green Berets, not Delta Force, but don't quote me on that. That raided in, took
It was
Noriega out,
it
and
was all of them actually. Yeah.
yeah, and then there was a slight little grace period of getting things running. But then let's look at what happened to Panama via visual. And for those that are just listening, I'm bringing up a GDP chart again for Panama. And we see 1984, Noriega was in charge. We're getting dips. It's flatlining. It's not doing very well. And what was it, 90?
90 because
Yeah.
it was before Desert Storm, which was 91.
Yeah, so 90 we take them out, and if you can see my cursor, I'm over it right now. Now there was about 10 years of it still being flatlined, and then it just exploded. And what is that? Three, six times the
Mhm.
GDP of what it was when Noriega was in charge.
You
So
also
yes,
had a
there was
very
a period of growth and a period of
mm,
establishing themselves, but what happened was not only did Panama flourish from being basically rescued from the oppression of the cartels, but also our relations. Panama Canal is a very important thing.
exactly.
The
That was
Panama
the point I
Canal
was
is
going to make.
probably one of the most important things in the
You
world
had
for the
two
U.S.
big strategic things going on there. One, Noriega was essentially a cartel head,
Hmm.
just like Maduro was. I can't remember the name of the something of the sun. I can't remember the name of the
Oh
one
yeah,
in
yeah, yeah.
Venezuela, but it essentially is a cartel run by Venezuelan army. Similar thing was happening in Panama. As you said, Panama also had the Panama Canal, just like in Venezuela.
Cartel of the Suns.
Cartel of the Suns.
Yeah,
In
I knew
Venezuela,
it was something pretty simple that we were just missing the right word, but
the big strategic thing about Venezuela is that it's not just those resources, it's who those resources were going to. Because they used to come to us back when the regime was friendly. And then once Chavez took over, that oil started to mostly go to China.
mhm.
China and Iran are the two main suppliers of crude to China.
Venezuela and
I'm
Iran,
sorry, what did I say?
China and Iran.
I said China and Iran. Yeah, or
What most
Venezuela and
people don't
Iran
know about
supplying to
China
China.
is it's a massive country with a lot of people, almost half of the world population, realistically. What is it, like 2 point something billion? So
That is somewhat in
about a
dispute, but yes, it is
about a
about
third of the world population.
the estimate
India
is
coming
close
in
to two.
next. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then but with all that massive land area and people and people power, which is what China thrives on,
Mhm.
cheap labor, right? Uh, they have actually very poor resources in that land area.
Coal is probably their biggest resource. I think they have some pretty significant iron deposits as well, so they do have a decent steel uh industrial base, and that is why they keep building so many coal power plants
Well,
because that's their
except
biggest
they were
resource.
using that up. That's why they went to the pig iron. Remember the pig iron?
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
For
Yeah.
those in the audience, pig iron is when you remelt already used steel to make new steel. It doesn't work out as well. It's very brittle and doesn't last very long, rusts easily. So yeah, they were reusing steel as this great innovation, but it turned out to be a crap product. So you
Hmm.
bake a
Hmm.
building, and 10 years later, the thing is falling down, even though it has a steel frame.
Yeah, plus all the corruption and graft and
Hmm.
embezzlement and all that that the China Uncensored channel has covered a lot of. But the
So
the
if you're
the
getting your
other
workout equipment from China, question the steel.
yes, the other strategic thing there. So not only have you hurt China, not just for the resources, but they were giving support. There was serious concerns about Russia and China basing military assets in Venezuela, but you also had the close cooperation between Venezuela and Cuba that has now been cut off. And the other thing you have there is if you'd have been paying attention the past several years, you have a very large resistance movement against the regime.
Hmm.
I mean, one of the reasons the Biden administration put a upped the bounty on Maduro was there was an election, and it was obvious to everyone who wasn't a sycophant of the Maduro regime that he lost that election and just straight up slash stole and or ignored the results. I mean, this year's no was it this year's or last year's the most recent Nobel Peace Prize recipient was the opposition leader who is now in exile, is living in exile because she had to flee or else be arrested and killed.
Hmm.
Right.
Uh,
So that's the other thing you have here. The point being that the long rambling point being this is a great illustration of rigid mental thinking because you have all these people on the right, all these rigid non-interventionists saying no, never, period. It's all the same. It is clearly not all the same. One, you have a different situation within this country, but two, even if you're someone like me who will at least partially defend the Iraq invasion, something you can't deny is that that was way the heck over there. Way the heck over there. This is not that far from us. And it's really not that far from us when you consider, like I said, the cozy relationship between Venezuela and Cuba is 90 miles away from the Florida coast. So you have a clear strategic interest, you have a clear direct national interest in keeping our own hemisphere safe from these threats.
Yeah, and the numbers I'm going to throw out now, I got from a man named Daniel DiMartino. He's a Venezuelan-born economist and writer. Uh, one of the things that he brings up in when he's speaking about this is he's actually speaking before we went in and got Maduro. He's just speaking about how important Venezuela is even before that. And I think there was already some of the interventions coming along, like we were droning the boats and stuff like that at that point.
Hmm.
But he was talking about, you brought up oil, but also drugs. And what happens in Venezuela is they don't make the cocaine. Cuba, not Cuba, Colombia
Colombia and
and
Bolivia.
and Bolivia pretty much supply the cocaine, but Venezuela is responsible for about 20%. And again, these numbers are from this man, and you know, I'm gonna lean on the expert because I don't have the data he has, and if somebody can prove me wrong, then just put it in the comments, all right? But about 20% of the coke that comes into the U.S. comes from Venezuelan, and that's actually supplied by those other two countries. And what Maduro and his cronies did, Chavez and then later Maduro and his cronies did, was they actually stopped producing oil because they realized there's more money in drugs. Their number one export is the drugs, and they actually put the oil on the back burner. And so 20% is significant. If I mean, a lot of high-powered Wall Street traders are going to be upset that their cocaine is going to go up, and there's
The
going to be
numbers I
inflation
have
on their
seen from
cocaine. But
various sources are that roughly 20% is the number one source. It's not obviously the majority, but it is the plurality of
mhm.
it is the number
More
one
than Mexico, which is
source.
right on the border, so it's that's significant. But when we get back to oil, what people don't realize is we looked at that chart with the decrease in GDP and how recently Chavez actually took power. I mean, he died of stomach cancer, so he wasn't in power very long, and then Maduro took over. Uh, is the refineries where I live here near Houston, Texas, were designed to process that heavy crude
I'd
that you
forgotten
were
that.
talking about.
Yeah.
So they actually make it into a very fine product. So they when they started dealing with China and Russia and all the other countries that are in BRICS and not friendly to us realistically, they cut off that supply to us.
Mm.
So basically, they not only did they just hurt their own people by reducing production. I think he brought up that it used to be like 3.5 to 4 million barrels a day, and now it's like 500,000 or something along that. Like, it was 3 to 4 to 500 something at
Hmm.
some point, and it's because they didn't want to ship it to Texas because they were told not to ship it to Texas
And that's
to
not
be
even
refined.
counting the tens of millions of dollars in assets of American companies that they seized when they nationalized. So if you want to talk about American interest and American first, an international court had already levied a finding, a decision against Venezuela to something. I think they owe something like $25 billion to two or three different oil company, U.S. based oil companies,
Hmm.
ExxonMobil, Conoco, and I think there's another one that they also. It may be BP. It might not be a U.S. company, but there are two or three oil companies that an international court, not a U.S. court, an international court ruled, no, you owe these people recompense because you seized so many of their assets. So not only did they seize their assets, they kicked them out, and then they stopped producing. To your point, in
Yeah,
order
but
to
the
produce
great
more
news
drugs.
here is if you go back to previous production, that's done in a year.
Yeah,
That's done. You're paid back in a year. I mean, go, doing quick. If it was the low end, 3 million barrels, that's 2.5 million barrels at what is it now? Like 50, $70 a barrel, something along those lines.
it's a good question.
I think it's in the middle of the road, which would be around 70, 80. But yeah, fact check me there. You're already mostly there. And so now you're selling your crude to enrich your company, not your company, your country, because you can't process it. You have
Mm.
no means to process it in your country. So you're selling it to the person who the people who are right there, by the way, to ship that stuff in, who can actually process it for you. And so you're making money, we're making money, everybody's making money. That's the business way.
Uh,
That's the old rising tides lift all ships.
yes.
That's what we're going for here when being under the boot of China and Russia and Iran was destroying the country.
Depending on what kind of crude, right now it's running between 60 something and 70 something dollars a barrel.
There you go. I was on it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So depending on the kind of crude. Uh, it to that point. So this was a rabbit hole I didn't mean to go down, but for
I
the
mean, before you rabbit hole, not that I'm being a little selfish, but that would enrich the area I live in very, because you've been down here at night when we're
yep,
driving back. You see
yep.
how much of that area where all those refineries is dark. You see all
Mhm.
the lights and you see the smoke and everything, but how much of that is dark right now? That's because it was built to handle that production, which we were
Mhm.
handling at the time in the early 2000s. These things weren't built yesterday.
It's
These
one
these
of the
plants are 30
reasons
years old, 40 years old.
it is one of the reasons that Canadian pipeline was being built in the first place
Hmm.
is because of the eh, reduction and then complete cutoff of the Venezuelan crude is one of the reasons that big pipeline that was going from the sand fields in Canada all the way down the Great Plains to Louisiana and Texas. That's one of the reasons that that pipeline was being built was to feed those refineries which had their main supplier cut off. Um, but the another point to be made here, I think, is when it comes to the rigid mental thinking, is all right, if you are non-interventionist to the extreme, to darn near pacifistic levels, okay, then what are you going to do about it? Because another point to be made here is exactly what you said, which is the 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 Houston, Louisiana area where all those refineries are is theoretically about to have a big boom in business. Why is that important? Well, one of the reasons that's important is because
We need growth to outpace inflation. How about that?
exactly.
Oh,
As
okay. I
much
didn't
as
know
I
that's where you're going with it. I just threw that out there, but
as much as I hate him, Mitch McConnell was right when he said no one ever lost an election by spending too much money.
hmm.
I don't remember when it was and who it was who was pressing him, but some conservative journalist type person was pressing him on the fact that the Republican Party is ostensibly the small government party, and yet it never actually cuts spending and cuts the government. Why? Because no one actually wants it. We all talk a big game about the overreach of government, the bloat of government being too powerful, inflation being a problem, and it is. And yet, when it comes time to cut something, oh, no, 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 don't cut that. I like that program. Okay, well, something's got to be cut somewhere. We have a we have an over $2 trillion, well, actually, no, we collect $2 trillion in revenue. I think we spend something like 5 or 6 trillion dollars right now. It's an obscene amount of money
Yeah. Well,
that we are
we're at the
spending,
point where the interest
and
is
we
going to
don't
be
have
on
it.
our entire revenue. Yeah.
Exactly. So
For those
if
that
you
have
can,
credit cards, just think of paying the minimum on your credit card and it's everything you have in your bank account.
yes,
That's where we're
gut
at.
gutless weasels in Washington will not cut spending. But hey, guess what, guys? They work for you. They won't cut spending because you'll vote them out of office if they do. Even the ones that want to cut spending, and there aren't that many, even the ones who
Rand Paul, Thomas
recognize,
Massey, that's
yep,
it.
even the ones who recognize we have to cut spending or we're in big trouble, and again, there aren't that many, they
Fetterman's
can't.
been talking a little bit too. I like him.
And so if you can't boost the economy by cutting spending to cut inflation, well, then you'd better find some additional sources of revenue. If you can't curb your addiction to your credit card, well, then you'd better get some more money coming in, or your household's going to be in big trouble.
Well,
You'd
this
better
is
find a second job or sell off some assets or act, unearth some buried gold in your backyard. That's the point of Venezuela. That's the point of Greenland.
Well, this is where I might flip my script a little bit because we talk about empathy versus compassion,
Hmm.
and compassion is finding the best solution to the problem, where empathy is just feeling the pain. And I was going to go with the 30 million people that live in Venezuela that are better off now because of what, if we do it right. If we follow through and finish correctly here, that are going to be better off just like Panama was. But no, now that I'm thinking about it, all your little pet projects, you bleeding heart lefties that you want to keep funding, we need growth.
Mhm.
So this is the only way it's going to work. If you want to keep spending that money like California is, California better be rating freaking the Philippines or something.
Well,
It's just don't
well,
don't
no, that's
quote
a good
don't
point. I don't
clip
know
me
if
on
you,
that. That was a joke,
I
but
don't.
yeah,
Well,
it's
speaking of jokes that aren't actually a joke, is I don't know if you saw this, but last week or the week before, the San Francisco City Council voted a reparations bill through and then admitted they don't have the money because the city is broke. It
yeah,
was
I
a
read the
pure
bill.
virtue signal.
I read the bill and it's to start an account for a payback. So
It was a
it's
pure virtue signal, and there
mm,
is absolutely no money for this account that they are setting up to make it to for reparations payments for the descendants of slaves. I didn't bother to read the bill because it was so absurd. I'd love to see how they're going to walk this tightrope to even figure out who's eligible for these payments, but that's a topic for another
the
day.
one drop
The
rule, man.
Exactly. The point being that the point being that there's a very specific example of something you think is so important, but okay, dollars and cents, practicality for the sake of argument. Let's say that is something moral. That's a good policy. That's the right policy. How are you going to pay for it?
hmm it's like the vacation you want to go on and you put it on a credit card because you didn't have the money in your bank account. How many times can you do that
Mm, yeah,
before it catches up to you?
exactly. Exactly. All right. Well, are we done flagellating that equine?
Yeah, I think I said what I needed to say. Let me go over it in my head. Uh, Drug money was their biggest export. It gives them the ability to ramp up oil production and actually take advantage of their resources. Gold, I mean, gold. Actually, this might be the time to buy. Not right now, but as soon as they open up that market again, because the influx of gold is going to drive the price down for a little bit. And what we know about gold is it always goes up.
Yeah.
So you just, no specific advice here. I'm not a financial advisor, but you might be looking to see when that dip happens, or even the
Mhm.
anticipation of that dip happens, and then you can
Well, I
jump in
think
there.
that's already happening with oil prices because I don't know about where you are, but we saw a nice drop in gas prices here. And I have to think that's all speculation, all the speculative market speculating that we're about to see a nice drop in oil barrel prices here
Well,
soon.
I only get gas once a month because I work from home. So I actually need to get gas tomorrow. So I will report on that next time.
Well,
Uh,
so you said, I don't remember what you said, but it made me think of something either when we were talking Wheel of Time or last social episode that another good analogy for rigid mental thinking is when I first started training, something I had to be cognizant of that was really important was don't diagnose the same thing every time just because you've seen it once, or even if you've seen it 100 times. So, for instance, uh, anterior pelvic tilt. So, because so many of us sit so often, what happens is the muscles on the front of your hips, your pelvis, they tighten up. The muscles along your back, your glutes, your hamstrings, your lower back, they all get lax, they get weak, they get lazy, they get stretched out, and that causes your pelvis to tilt forward. Well, that's a problem for multiple reasons, and it's a problem you've got to fix. You know, in the gym and even outside of the gym. And so it was something I had to address a lot because so many of my clients were desk jockeys. And before I could get them doing the kinds of things I wanted them to do, the kinds of exercises I wanted them to do, first I had to fix their anatomy. The danger is that everyone who comes in, you're going to assume or you're going to see that same problem. But every individual is different. You know, this is why you have to step back, push all that out of your mind, or at least have it in the back of your mind rather than the forefront of your mind, and evaluate the individual as an individual. That is why you take an individual history and say, what are your genetics? What's your injury history? What is your athletic or exercise history to this point? You know, what has it been lately? You go through all of these things, and it's been a while, but you've gone through the kinds of things you do on an evaluation, both on this channel and on your Real Fitness channel. And you have to individualize it because every situation is different. Now, it may turn out that this situation is exactly or almost exactly like the last situation. It might be, but then again, it might not be.
Hmm.
You know, because you might have someone who, for their own particular reasons, are completely different, perhaps the polar opposite of what you're used to seeing. But if your thinking is too rigid, your prescription is going to be the same every time. And that's a problem if you're trying to fix a problem that doesn't exist.
Hmm.
And that is what I am seeing with the criticism from the right, is that rigid mental thinking that is applying
Intervention is bad. Intervention is bad. Yeah.
all of these interventions that
Hmm.
we have seen in the past that were failures, you know, completely or partially, and we don't want that again. Okay, but why were those failures? Why did that go wrong? Is this situation different? It, oh, the other point I wanted to make, the last point on this, is it's a lot like my infuriation with the Never Trump movement. And I'll reset this because I talked about it in the lead up to the election, because there are still a lot of these people out there, you know, prominent people of, in 2016, Never Trump made sense because a lot of the things he said were very concerning, and because he had no political record, not even just within politics, but he didn't have much of a rhetorical political record. You know, so like Rush Limbaugh, if he ever ran for office, well, he didn't have he never would have had a political history in office, but he had plenty of rhetorical record. Trump didn't have that. He really only talked politics. Really, the only through line from all the way back in the 80s, you can find him on Donahue and Oprah talking about this, is trade.
Hmm.
That was the only core value that you could identify going all the way back. So Never Trump made at least a degree of sense in 2016 because we didn't know who this guy was. And there was a lot of reason to be concerned. Never Trump made absolutely no sense in 2020 and 2024 because the guy had a record. Now, if you're saying
Yeah,
no,
at minimum, you could have said sometimes instead of never.
exactly, you
Yeah.
could have said, you know,
Or
no
even most
because
of
of
the time,
these.
no. You could even said most of the time no if his decisions were not what you wanted to happen. So,
And a lot of the TDS and Never Trump rhetoric was the exact same rhetoric as 2014, 2015, 2016. Like, did you guys ignore the 4 years he was in office the first time? Just like here, hey, a lot of these same people saying, "Oh my gosh, this is awful about Venezuela," were the exact same people saying we're about to start World War III by blowing the crap out of Iran's nuclear facility. How'd that turn out?
well, actually, on the brink of a revolution in Iran. So, yes,
There you go.
yeah.
We have a history. We can look to that and we can say, is this going to be Iran or is this going to be Iraq?
Hmm.
Well, the
That's why
so far,
I mean, you were talking about having to treat people individually and everything. You can lean on the past.
Hmm.
to some degree because you need heuristic to speed up the process, or else you're
Hmm.
going to be reinventing the wheel with everybody. And that's why I brought up Panama. I was like, okay, is this Iraq or is this Panama? And to me, it feels more similar to Panama. Again, history doesn't repeat, it rhymes. That's the old saying, right? It rhymes, and if it's rhyming in that direction, I want to see where it goes. If it starts looking like a ground occupation like we had in Iraq, I'm gonna probably start swinging the other way because I mean that's some harsh territory I mean that's as harsh as occupying Afghanistan. We have the most technologically advanced military in the world, and freaking guys in trucks with AK-47s were giving us trouble in Afghanistan because of the terrain.
Hmm.
Someone asked me, why hasn't Russia beat Ukraine yet? Because urban warfare sucks. That's why. Because it's a vast area where a lot of the fighting is done in streets.
And when it's not in urban, it's a vast flat plain that has recreated World War One.
Hmm. Yeah, it's not that simple. Oh, you're the bigger, stronger country with more technology. You should win. Well, if we'd let them go at it, Russia's eventually going to win. No one, I mean, unless they just say, "Oh, it's been too much. We've taken too many losses." Other than that, if they just said we're both going to the death, Russia's going to win.
Hmm.
But it's not going to be good for them, and it hasn't been good for them. And people need the people of the country need to be questioning their leader on his motives because it has not been good for them.
Hmm.
But I think it's different here. I hope it's different here, and I'm hoping that my hope isn't affecting my ability to think critically about it. But yeah, there's a lot of things that point positive and a few things that point negative.
Yeah. All right. Well, you had something else you wanted to talk about. You want to pivot to that now?
Let's go ahead and tease that for Saturday, like we've
Okay.
talked about. I wanted because I think this is a longer conversation. What I was doing is I flip back and forth between the social issues that we're talking about like right now, and actually spend less time on that to things that are actually either in my field with this, which is health or mental health. And one of the things that seems to be the topic du jour is sexless relationships and how that affects people. And I have two main sources that I want to pull from. One is Adam Lane Smith, and he's got his 7 reasons women lose sex drive in relationships. And the other one is hold on, let me get her name real quick.
Laura, how?
No, 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 that's a different one. But
Okay.
this one is Karen Seitz. She's
Okay.
also a clinical psychologist, and hers is 10 reasons women want a sexless marriage. So it's kind of interesting that the guy is putting the onus on the guys and the female is putting the onus on the females. And so I kind of want to go through, we'll probably start with the guys version because I think it's actually a good segue to say, okay, so we'll go through those. And then you say, okay, say you're the guy that's doing all of those things. Now the other one's more relevant. Because if you're not doing those things, well, you got to fix yourself, my friend. So that's kind of the direction I want to go there. But I have my lists. I'm going to spring it on Heath so he can react in real time to these bullet points, and we'll go through that and how it affects the relationship. Period. But also, yeah, Laura, how I have I'm as what I like to do is I synthesize information. So we've got two experts, clinical experts on relationship here, giving their reasons why this stuff happens. One kind of coming at the girls, one coming at the guys, and then I have 3 other sources: Laura Howe, Marianne Brandon, which we've the sex doctors we've talked
Hmm.
about,
Hmm.
and another couple, Tarina and Joel Terry, who talk attachment styles and basically what to expect from relationships and what you should take, what you should not take, how you should handle things. So those are kind of the 5 main sources I'm coming from, and I'm going to try to synthesize all those together with my own thoughts and see how Heath reacts to that. So I think that'll be a good subject, and we're
All
going to
right.
throw in some Wheel of Time because it's our Wheel of Time day. We have examples.
Yeah, there are a couple of great examples in the series. We've talked relationships before, but when you broached this topic, there were two that popped into my head of these would be some interesting examples because you have a more mature couple in Len and Nynaeve and how they deal with it, and a more immature couple, just literally younger, much younger, in Perrin and Fail and how they deal with it and how this affects them. And I think that is important to use those examples to say, you know, how can we learn these lessons in a way that is are more easily applicable to real life so we don't fall into these traps.
Hmm. Yeah, because there's a lot of traps in there, and it's an interesting topic because people do not know the underlying reasons they do things, but
Mm,
also you don't know the underlying the thing about relationship is you don't know the underlying reasons about what your partner's doing, no matter how much you think you know them. And
mhm,
it's a balance where you have to look at it and say, am I being manipulated, or is this something wrong with me, or is this something wrong with her despite what she wants? And so I say her there. This can go either way, but the in this topic with sexless loss of sex drive and sexless relationships, it is usually the female that pulls away. So, I mean, that's just nature.
mhm,
Usually, there are examples of the other way, but we're going to speak in the majority.
mhm.
Uh, I guess one last thing, football. I got to rant for a second.
Oh yeah.
Why do we have a Monday night football playoff game?
I
Be
have been ranting about that ever since they expanded, because I think they started that when they expanded the playoff and put an extra wild card
apparently the
team in
first
each
one was in
one.
1930 or something, but I don't remember this last year
No, I
having a
remember I remember it at least since they expanded with the extra wild card team. And it doesn't make any sense to me because you could have Saturday and Sunday both
three
have
and
six
three.
games.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you don't have someone with a short week or
Yeah,
shorter
because
week.
ultimately the winner of the Monday night game could end up playing on Saturday.
Exactly.
And I mean,
Why?
why? I mean, it's
Why?
not, here's the other thing about it. I have a feeling because of markets, they made the matchup, and this is not just me being a homer, although there is part of that. It's the Texans versus the Steelers on Monday night in Pittsburgh. It's a little different at noon than it is
Ooh,
at
that's a good
7 at
point.
night. And I think they want the Pittsburgh Aaron Rodgers to go on and the Southern team, Houston Texans, to be knocked out of the playoffs
I hadn't thought about that.
because our market is not very big because Dallas takes up everything in Texas from here on over. And then we got New Orleans right to our side, and we got Kansas City just north of us. You know, our market is technically considered a small market. And you talk about history, Pittsburgh has fans all across the country.
Hmm.
Houston is basically limited to the Houston metro area as far as their fan base.
Yeah.
So I have a feeling this was a not only to give a short week if for whoever wins, but also to knock Houston out of the playoffs
Yeah.
because it's going to be freaking cold fronts going through that weekend. So it's going to be freaking cold at night in
You still
Pittsburgh.
could have a noon, 3:30, and 7 o'clock game on Saturday like you do on Sunday, though. So
Mm.
yeah, it is. I don't remember when I first noticed this, but it has never made any sense to me of why do you play a Monday night game on the wild card weekend? Because that means going into the division weekend, someone's going to have a
Well, they
short
don't
week.
play a Monday night game on in the 17th or the 18th week.
The last week
So
of the
it's
season. Yeah,
fair. Yeah, on the last week of
exactly.
the season. So it
Exactly.
is fair for whoever makes it in. But then they do it right in the first round of the playoffs. So someone could have a 5 day turnaround,
Hmm.
especially in the cold like that where injuries are going to pile up a little bit.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I maybe it's just me. I feel like like having that one game on Monday night kind of detracts from the hype too. Because if you've got 3 games Saturday, 3 games Sunday, I mean, you've got a full weekend of if you care about, football in general or in particular, or even if you're one of these more casual fans that starts to care when the playoffs happen, it's, oh no, you got an exciting weekend. That having that night game to me feels very anticlimactic.
Hmm.
So it's just one more reason of I don't understand why you're doing this.
Yeah. Part of it's revenue because 3 games in a row, you get a little burnout by the 7 o'clock game. And so you can have the Monday night game and people getting off work and watch the game or whatever. But it takes away the quote unquote fairness that they always tout that they're doing in the NFL. It's like,
Yes.
no, you're putting revenue over
Well,
fairness. And the way you scheduled it, you made sure one team had a disadvantage.
also for the last 10, 15 years now, player safety has been a big buzz phrase in the NFL, and
5 day
shortening
rest
the
is not long.
week uh, adds
four
to
day
that.
rest. Yeah, four
Yeah,
day rest.
that is something that the players have been complaining about since they started the Thursday night games. Is hold on a second, you keep talking about player safety, and now you're adding in more Thursday night games, which is an even shorter week. That's more dangerous for us. So you're being hypocritical.
Hmm.
That the player safety stuff is just virtue signaling.
Yeah. Now here's what I hope happens in the AFC. NFC, I don't know. I don't have a dog in the fight there. But in the AFC, I hope all three wild card teams win. And
That'd be funny.
we actually have a setup where that could work because I mean, there's the us, which has the best defense in the league. There's the Bills, who you can't count them out ever, and the Chargers, who are pretty freaking tough. Yeah, they
Mm-hmm.
lost their last game to the Broncos by like 10 points, but they also sat half their team because by the time they played, they knew
That
exactly where they couldn't change their
their
seating
quarterback
positions.
wasn't even in uniform.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
quarterback wasn't in
he was
uniform,
in
starting
sweats.
running back,
Yeah.
half the defense. It's so if we have upsets, Houston beating Pittsburgh would not be an upset. In fact, I wouldn't
Mm,
be surprised if they're the favorite, even
yeah.
though they have to go to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is the winner of the worst division in the AFC. Uh,
And they've really struggled all season. They've been very up and down.
yeah, and Aaron Rodgers can run a little bit, but not from Daniil Hunter and
Um,
Will Anderson
he
Jr.
runs better than Philip Rivers. I'll give him that.
Yeah, but so we've got Houston is probably the favorite. The Bills actually might be the favorite over the Jags, which we could use the Bills to take the Jags out. That would be nice. And the Chargers have a good chance against the Patriots. And if that
I
happens,
think that's the toughest upset because I agree with so Manti Te'o, who's on Good Morning Football now. He said he thought the Patriots were the most complete team. I don't remember if in the playoffs or just in the AFC, and I tend to agree with that. They seem to be the most complete and the deepest team at least in the AFC. And
but
so
it's still
that's
a
going to be the
possible
hardest
upset.
upset. Yeah.
Yeah, it is still a
But the
possible.
Chargers are a good team, so it is possible. Yeah.
And if that happens, Houston gets a home game in the divisional round because the Chargers will play the Broncos and then Houston will play the Bills at home.
Which
And if
be
somehow the
okay.
Chargers can knock off the Broncos, Houston will get a home game in the AFC Championship.
And they won during the regular season at home against the Bills. And they won
Hmm.
pretty handily.
And against the Chargers in San Diego, or not San
Yeah.
Diego, Los Angeles.
Los Angeles, wherever the heck they are
They
now.
used to be
Yeah.
San Diego. They were wearing their San Diego jerseys that time. So,
I'm still gonna say um I'm still leaning towards what I said last week of New England versus San Francisco because those two teams are both pretty complete and pretty hot going into the playoffs. But I do agree with a lot of other people I've heard pontificating on this that this is one of the more wide open years we have had in a while
hmm.
of practically anybody. To your point, yeah, I don't give the Steelers much of a chance. Maybe they beat Houston just because Houston's offense is so anemic, but I don't give them much of a chance at all of getting past the divisional round at best. You
Hmm.
know, maybe they win this wild card round, but then that's it. But otherwise, the AFC is pretty wide open because that Houston defense is so darn good that if their offense can just be mediocre, then they can make it to the I saw a clip of Dungy saying their defense is so good it could carry them to a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's right. That's all you need is for the offense to be just average.
Well, and that Buffalo Jacksonville game is kind of a win-win for us because if Buffalo takes them out, Jacksonville's hot right now. They're super hot.
Yeah.
But if Jacksonville wins and we win, we play Jacksonville in Jacksonville, which we get a warm weather game for the playoffs. So it's kind of a win-win there where we don't have to travel to
I
freaking Denver or New England.
I will say I am much more interested in the AFC this year than in the NFC. I don't really care that much about the NFC
Well,
and who
Panthers
comes
are
out of
probably
it.
going to get knocked out right away by LA. Uh,
I never trust a team that backs into the playoffs, whatever the sport. And they lost, but then got help and so backed into the playoffs.
Eagles will
I
probably
never,
take out the
yeah.
Niners. Seattle's so freaking good. That might be the one seed gets to the Super Bowl. I'm gonna pick Seattle there. And shoot. The Broncos, they're the number one seed, but they just don't look fantastic.
Much like the Bears, they have had to rely on fourth quarter and overtime comebacks way too often. And when you get into the playoffs, that eventually, no matter the sport, that eventually bites you because the competition is just that much tougher.
Hmm.
I'd love to see the Bears go on a run just because the Bears, but I don't have that much faith in them.
Well, if somebody
Uh,
can knock Philadelphia out, we will have a new pairing for the Super Bowl.
I don't want to see Philadelphia or San Fran. Other than that, I don't really care about the NFC.
Hmm.
I don't want San Fran or Philly again. Much like I was, glad that the chefs were finally out of it. It's just give me someone new since there isn't a team I really care about in the NFC playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, do I care about any of these teams? I mean, it'd be fun to see Carolina run the table, but it ain't gonna happen.
I think it'd be more fun to see the Bears run the table. Um, just because of what a turnaround that would be in a single year with Ben Johnson coming in as the coach for an organization that has been pretty hapless for a long time and a quarterback that after a year people thought was a bust.
Hmm.
So that would be
Well,
that would be
I'll admit I
pretty
thought he was a
interesting, pretty
bust. Yeah.
impressive, and it's been pretty surprising. Is that is I don't remember if I used him as an example or not, but I've mentioned a number of times. You brought up Seattle, and I think I was talking. I don't think I mentioned this when we were recording. I think it was when you and I were talking. Is to me, Seattle and Minnesota reminds me of what happened to Philadelphia after they finally won the Super Bowl. And there was a lot of talk of, do we keep Nick Folk because he had such a great run that year after Wentz got hurt? Or do we keep Wentz, who's the guy we drafted in the first round, top 10, top five, maybe it was. And there were a lot of people who thought, you know what? He's already been hurt. That doesn't look good. And they were right because he ended up getting hurt some more. Use your capital while you have it and trade that number one first round quarterback for some picks and stay with your hot hand and stay with Folk. And they might have been a dynasty if they had done that. Who knows?
I
But
don't. Folk didn't play very well in Jacksonville,
no,
so yeah.
no, but it was Jacksonville,
Well, we got Jacksonville now. That's basically
Jacksonville
run
is
the
one of
table
those
for eight
weird
games in the row.
Jacksonville is one of those weird franchises that'll that'll be real cold for years and then all of a sudden they're like dominant. They come out of nowhere and just dominate. Like, you
The
know,
problem
it,
is there's no scenario where it could happen, but it would be. I don't think there's a scenario where it could happen. If Jacksonville wins and the Chargers win, the Chargers go to Denver and we'd play Jacksonville. If Jacksonville wins and New England wins, it would be us against New England and Jack. Okay, so there is a scenario where we can meet Jacksonville in the AFC Championship. That would be fun. So if the Patriots win and Jacksonville win and we win, Houston being me talking, if Houston wins, Jacksonville wins, and New England wins, then that means Jacksonville plays New England and we play Denver, which could put us in the AFC Championship against Jacksonville. That would be fun. But it would be a very low market game, so we know the shenanigans will go on because Jacksonville is the smallest market in the country. That's why they keep sending them to London every year because they're trying to make Jacksonville the first London team. And they're trying to force the hand, and it's very obvious.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, we'll see what happens this weekend, and then we will rant about it because football is a stupid sport. All right.
Well, no, we won't rant about it next time because it will be Saturday.
Yeah.
So we were going to
Next
talk
week.
relationships on Saturday, mixing it in with some Wheel of Time, but it will be more of the secular talk instead of the book talk this time. All right.
Okay.
Later.